He offered her $50,000 to be his fiancée for 30 days. No kisses, no love, just rules. She picked up a stranger millionaire and fell into a contract love she never expected. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please make sure you are subscribed and tap the notification bell so you never miss a story like this one. And tell me in the comments, where are you watching from today? Now, let us go back to our main character. Rain was pouring hard over New York that night, tapping against the windshield of a battered silver sedan parked at the arrivals lane of JFK Airport. The clock on the dashboard blinked 10:37 p.m. Ava Collins tightened her grip on the steering wheel, fighting exhaustion. She was on her third driving shift of the day, trying to cover rent and the rising medical bills for her mother's care home in Queens. Her phone buzzed a new passenger request. Terminal 4, VIP pickup. She sighed, brushed the crumbs from her jacket, and pulled into the lane of glossy black cars. A man in a tailored charcoal suit was waiting under the canopy, rain dripping from his hair. When their eyes met, he opened the door without a word and slid into the back seat. "Mr. Reed?" she asked carefully. The man simply nodded, eyes still on his phone. His voice was calm, controlled. "Reed, yes. Midtown, please." Ava glanced at the navigation and started the meter. The silence in the car felt heavy, the kind that only wealthy people carried. She caught a glimpse of his reflection in the mirror, sharp jaw, distant eyes, the kind of man who never had to explain himself. Then a call came through his Bluetooth. "Julian, the board is waiting. We need a statement about the broken engagement." Ava froze. Julian Reed. The name sounded familiar, CEO of Reed Global, the one who had just canceled his wedding to the daughter of a senator. His reply was low, steady. "Handle it. Tell them it was mutual. I will manage the charity gala alone." He hung up and exhaled, pressing his temples as the city lights blurred past the rain-streaked glass. At a red light, Ava risked a glance through the mirror. "Rough night?" she asked softly. He looked up, as if noticing her for the first time. "You could say that." They drove in silence for a few more blocks until he said something that made her grip the wheel tighter. "You handle pressure well. Not many people could drive through this storm and stay calm." He paused, his tone unreadable. "How would you like to make $50,000 to be my fiancée for a month?" Ava thought she misheard him. "I am sorry, what did you just say?" Julian's gaze met hers through the mirror, steady and emotionless. "I have a series of public events next month. The board expects stability after the breakup. I need someone real enough to fool the press. You were already in the right place at the right time." The wipers squeaked against the windshield. "You do not even know me," she said. "I do not have to," he replied quietly. "You sign a contract. You play the part. You get paid. Then we both walk away." For a long moment, the sound of rain was the only thing between them. Ava's heart thudded. $50,000. Her mother's next treatment. The eviction notice taped to her door. She wanted to laugh, or maybe cry. When they reached his building, he opened the door and paused before stepping out. "Think about it," he said, his voice calm but his eyes holding a strange flicker of something human. "My assistant will contact you tomorrow if you say yes." The door closed. Ava sat there, the meter still running, staring at the reflection of the man disappearing into the marble lobby. In her rearview mirror, the rain turned the city into streaks of silver light, beautiful, distant, and utterly unreachable. She whispered to herself, almost like a confession, $50,000 to pretend to belong. Then she shut off the engine and drove into the night. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the cracks of Ava's thin curtains, painting the small apartment in shades of pale gold. The city outside was already awake, the sound of horns and footsteps echoing through the narrow street. She sat at the edge of her bed, staring at her cracked phone screen. There were 2 messages from an unknown number, Julian Reed's assistant. The first message read, "If you are still considering the offer, Mr. Reed would like to meet you at 11 a.m. at his penthouse. Dress formally." The second message was short. "Discretion is essential." Ava's stomach twisted. She reread the texts twice, as if hoping they would disappear. $50,000, a contract, pretend to belong for 30 days. It sounded insane, and yet, so was watching her mother's treatment bills pile higher every week. By 10:30, she was standing outside the glass tower on Fifth Avenue, clutching a borrowed blazer and trying to calm her racing heart. The marble lobby gleamed like another world. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, the air smelled faintly of cedar and coffee. Julian was there, seated behind a sleek black desk. The skyline stretched endlessly behind him. He looked up as she entered, expression unreadable. "Miss Collins," he said simply, "you came." "I should at least hear the details," she answered. He gestured to a chair. "Fair enough." On the table lay a folder with a silver pen placed neatly on top. He opened it and began explaining each clause, his voice calm, deliberate. "This agreement lasts for 30 days. During that time, you will attend 5 public events as my fiancée. You will be compensated $50,000, paid in 2 installments." He turned a page. "There will be no physical intimacy. Separate rooms when necessary. No interviews or private communication with the press. You are free to walk away at any point. But if you disclose anything about the arrangement, the contract is void." Ava tried to process each line. The room felt colder with every word. "So I am just playing a part," she said softly. Julian met her gaze. "Exactly. Think of it as a performance. You help me fix my public image, and I help you fix your life. Simple." Her throat tightened. "And if people find out, then I will take responsibility," he replied. "Your name will be protected." She studied him, searching for any trace of mockery. But there was none, just that same cool restraint, as if this was no more personal than signing a business merger. Finally, she picked up the pen. "What if I change my mind?" "You will not," Julian said, his tone almost gentle. "People rarely walk away from a lifeline." Her fingers trembled as she signed her name at the bottom of the page. The pen left a dark trail of ink across the pristine paper, her choice written in permanent black. Julian closed the folder and stood. "Welcome to the arrangement, Miss Collins. My driver will take you to the stylist this afternoon. Your first appearance is the charity gala this Friday." She rose slowly, the words echoing in her mind. Arrangement, contract, pretend. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Ava looked at her reflection in the mirrored wall. Same face, same tired eyes, but something had shifted. For the first time in a long while, her future was not just uncertain, it was terrifyingly open. Outside, New York blazed in sunlight, alive and indifferent. Ava stepped onto the sidewalk, clutching the folder like it might burn her hands. Under her breath, she whispered, "What did I just sign myself into?" The next 2 days passed in a blur of instructions, fittings, and quiet disbelief. Ava had never seen so many mirrors in one room before. The stylist, a brisk woman named Valerie, circled her like an artist at work. "Chin up, shoulders back," she said, fastening the zipper on a dark blue evening gown that shimmered under the light. "You are no longer driving a car. You are driving attention." Ava stared at herself. The reflection looking back hardly seemed real. The worn jeans and tired hoodie were gone, replaced by silk and soft perfume. Her hair framed her face in gentle waves, her lips tinted with a shade of red she had never dared to wear. Julian entered halfway through the session, exchanging a few quiet words with Valerie. He wore a tailored suit, no tie, his posture as precise as ever. When his eyes met Ava's, his expression faltered for just a second, almost imperceptible. "That will do," he said, his voice lower than usual. Valerie smiled knowingly. "Mr. Reed, your fiancé is ready for the spotlight." Ava's pulse jumped at the word fiancé. It was just a role, she reminded herself. A contract, nothing more. That evening, they rehearsed introductions in the grand living room of his penthouse. Julian handed her a list of names, board members, investors, media figures, and guided her through how to respond. "You will hear questions about our relationship," he said. "Keep your answers vague but warm. Say we met through mutual friends. Smile when I glance at you. Never correct me in public." Ava tried to keep up, nodding as he spoke. And what do I say if they ask how long we have been together? He paused. 6 months. It sounds believable. She practiced the lines under her breath until the words felt mechanical. At one point, she looked up and caught him watching her, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. You do not have to be perfect, he said quietly. Just be real enough to fool them. The next evening was the gala. The hotel ballroom glittered with chandeliers and soft jazz. Cameras flashed as limousines arrived at the red carpet. Julian's hand brushed lightly against Ava's back as they stepped into the crowd. Ready? He murmured. No, she admitted. He smiled faintly. Good. Neither am I. They moved together like a scene from a movie, his calm presence anchoring her trembling nerves. Reporters called their names, and he answered every question with smooth, deliberate charm. Ava followed his lead, keeping her tone light and sincere. Then a woman in a sequined dress approached, a reporter from the New York Ledger. Her smile was sharp. Miss Collins, people are curious. How does a rideshare driver end up engaged to one of the most powerful CEOs in the city? Ava froze. The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. She could feel Julian tense beside her, but he did not speak. Ava inhaled slowly and met the woman's gaze. Maybe love does not care about resumes, she said, her voice calm but steady. Sometimes it just shows up in the wrong car at the right time. The reporter blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Around them, a few people laughed softly. Julian's eyes found hers again, and for the first time, there was no calculation in them, only quiet respect. Later that night, after the gala, the city lights shimmered outside Julian's penthouse. Ava stood by the window, still wearing the borrowed gown, the echo of cameras fading from her mind. Julian poured 2 glasses of wine and set one beside her. You handled that better than anyone on my PR team, he said. Ava turned to him, half smiling. I was terrified. Good, he replied, a rare hint of warmth in his tone. Fear keeps you honest. They stood in silence, watching the skyline stretch endlessly beyond the glass. Somewhere in that silence, something unspoken shifted between them. The contract was still on the table, but for the first time, it felt less like paper and more like possibility. 2 weeks later, the arrangement had settled into something that felt disturbingly normal. Every morning, Ava woke in the guest suite of Julian's penthouse to a city still wrapped in fog. They would have breakfast together, black coffee for him, toast and fruit for her while his tablet buzzed with news updates about Reed Global. Their names had become a quiet headline. Reed's mysterious fiancé wins, hearts at charity gala. Sometimes Ava caught herself reading the articles and almost believing them. The photos showed her smiling beside him, the picture of composure, not the girl who used to drive strangers through the rain for gas money. The days were filled with preparations for more appearances. A board luncheon, a gallery opening, a fundraiser in Central Park. Julian briefed her before each one, rehearsing every interaction until she could predict the rhythm of his public charm. Yet between those moments, when the lights dimmed and the photographers disappeared, a different rhythm began to take hold. Quiet, human, unguarded. One afternoon, a thunderstorm rolled over Manhattan, trapping them in the apartment. Julian stood by the piano in the living room, reading something on his phone. Ava was curled on the couch, sketching absent-mindedly on a notepad she had brought from home. The rain softened the city's noise until all that was left was the hush of the storm. Julian spoke without looking up. You draw. Ava glanced up, surprised. A little. I studied design before my mom got sick. He walked closer, curiosity replacing the usual control in his expression. Can I see? She hesitated, then handed over the page a quick sketch of the city skyline, the same view they saw from his windows. He studied it for a moment, then said quietly, You see the world differently. Ava shrugged. I just see what feels honest. Their eyes met. The silence between them stretched, soft and warm, like the space before a confession neither dared to make. Later that evening, they shared dinner in the quiet kitchen. No staff, no rules, no rehearsed dialogue. He poured her a glass of wine and asked, Do you miss it, driving? Sometimes, she said. At least then I knew where I was. Going. Julian smiled faintly. Do you know where you are going now?" She looked at him across the candlelight, unsure whether he meant the contract or something else entirely. Not anymore. The next night was another public event, a board dinner held in a rooftop garden. The city glittered below, a sea of lights stretching to the horizon. Ava wore a pale silver dress that caught the glow of every passing camera flash. Julian's hand rested lightly on her back as they greeted guests, moving together with the ease of practiced grace. Midway through the evening, a board member's wife stumbled, spilling her drink across the table. Without hesitation, Ava caught the glass before it shattered and smiled reassuringly. "No harm done," she said. The woman laughed nervously, and the moment passed. Julian watched from across the table, something like admiration flickering in his eyes. When the speeches ended and the crowd began to thin, he leaned close and whispered, "You saved me another PR disaster." Ava laughed softly. "You are welcome, Mr. Reed." But his next words made her heart stop. "Julian," he corrected. "You can call me Julian when it is just us." She froze, then nodded. "All right, Julian." The name felt different on her tongue, too personal, too real. And when he smiled, the distance that had once protected them seemed to disappear entirely. That night, as she lay in bed, Ava could still hear the rain from the afternoon, still see the way he had looked at her across the candlelight. The lines of the contract blurred in her mind. She had promised herself she would not forget what this was, a performance, a business deal, but the truth was slipping quietly through the cracks. For the first time, Ava feared she was no longer pretending. By the third week, Ava could no longer tell where the performance ended and where her real life began. The contract had said 30 days, but time inside Julian's world felt suspended days, blending into soft mornings, flashing cameras, and quiet nights that lingered too long. The next major event was a press conference at Reed Global headquarters. The company had just secured a groundbreaking green energy deal, and the media wanted to see the man who had rebuilt his image so flawlessly. When Ava stepped out of the car beside Julian, cameras flared, voices shouting questions that blurred into a storm of sound. She smiled, keeping her posture steady the way he had taught her, but her heart pounded hard beneath the borrowed dress. Inside, the conference room gleamed with chrome and glass. Journalists filled the seats, flashes bouncing off every surface. Julian stood behind the podium, every inch the confident CEO. When he began to speak, the crowd fell silent. His voice was calm, resonant, commanding. Ava sat in the front row, hands folded tightly in her lap. Watching him, she felt an ache she could not name. She had memorized every angle of his composure, every way he hid his exhaustion behind perfect control. But today, when his gaze drifted toward her mid-speech, she caught something else, a flicker of warmth, almost like gratitude. After the conference ended, they returned to his office. Julian loosened his tie and leaned against the desk, the weight of the day catching up with him. "You did well," he said quietly. "I just stood there," Ava replied. "That was enough," he said. "People believe what they see, and when they see you, they believe me." For a long moment, neither spoke. The hum of the city filled the silence. Then Julian asked, "How is your mother?" Ava blinked, surprised. "She is stable," she said softly. "The new medication helps. Thank you for asking." He nodded, then hesitated, as if debating something. "I could help," he said finally. "If the hospital ever needs—" She cut him off gently. "Please do not. I can handle it." Julian looked at her for a long time, then said, "You really mean that?" "I do," Ava said. "If I let you fix everything, then this stops being mine." That night, after dinner, Julian invited her to the rooftop terrace. The city stretched endlessly below, the skyline glittering like spilled glass. A cool wind brushed her hair as she leaned against the railing. He stood beside her, silent for a while. Then he said, "When I ended my engagement, the board called it reckless. They said love was a liability. Maybe they were right." Ava glanced at him. "Do you believe that?" "I used to," he said. "But then you walked into my car, arguing with me about GPS directions, and for the first time in a long time, I forgot about numbers." Her breath caught. The city noise faded until there was only the wind and the steady thud of her pulse. "Julian," she said quietly, "this is not in the contract." "I know," he said. "That is what scares me." Before either could say another word, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. His assistant, Clara, stepped onto the terrace, her expression pale. "Julian, you need to see this," she said, holding up a phone. A headline glowed on the screen. "Leaked contract exposes Reed's fake engagement." Beneath it, a blurred photo of the signed agreement, Julian's signature unmistakable. Ava's stomach dropped. She took a step back, her voice barely a whisper. "Someone found out." Julian's jaw tightened. "Do not move until I find out who did this." But Ava was already shaking her head. "You do not have to protect me. I knew this was a risk." He looked at her, his calm mask cracking for the first time. "Ava, this could destroy everything." She swallowed hard, her voice trembling. Maybe it already did. The city lights glimmered around them, beautiful and cold. The rooftop that had felt like a secret world suddenly became a stage again, too bright, too exposed. Ava turned away before he could see, the tears in her eyes. For the first time since signing the contract, she did not know if she was walking away from an arrangement or from the only man who had ever truly seen her. The story broke before dawn. By morning, every major news outlet had splashed their faces across the screen. Reed's relationship, a hoax. Cameras gathered outside the Reed Global building, waiting for a statement. Online, the comments turned cruel within hours. Ava sat at the edge of her bed, phone buzzing non-stop with messages she could not bear to open. The world that had once admired her now called her a liar, a gold digger, an actress for hire. She switched off the screen and stared at the floor. A knock came at the door. It was Clara, Julian's assistant, her face drawn and pale. "He is in crisis meetings. The board wants him to cut ties immediately. They think it is the only way to contain the damage." Ava felt her throat close. "He should," she whispered. "It is the smart thing to do." Clara hesitated. "He will not. Not yet." By the time Ava left the penthouse, the lobby was crowded with photographers shouting questions. She kept her head down, pushing through the noise until she reached the street. The rain had started again, thin and relentless. For a moment, she stood under the awning, breathing in the damp air, before walking away. That evening, she returned to her old neighborhood in Queens. Her mother's nurse greeted her with a worried smile. Inside the small apartment, everything smelled the same lavender detergent, soup on the stove. Her mother's eyes lit up when she saw her. "You look tired, sweetheart," she said softly. Ava knelt beside her chair and forced a smile. "I just needed to come home for a while." Meanwhile, across the city, Julian faced the board in a glass-walled conference room filled with tension. "We can issue a statement of apology," one member said. "Dissolve the contract, deny any emotional involvement." Julian's voice was steady but cold. "I will not deny it. You are risking your position," another warned. "Your investors are already nervous." Julian stood. "Then let them be. I will not save my image by erasing her dignity." The room fell silent. For once, the ruthless CEO was gone, replaced by a man who looked strangely human. That night, Julian went to the penthouse balcony alone. The city stretched beneath him, shimmering through the rain. On the coffee table behind him lay the contract creased, damp and meaningless now. He picked it up, hesitated, then tore it in half. The next morning, Ava found a letter slipped under her door. It was unsigned, but she knew the handwriting. "I am sorry for what this world did to you. None of it was your fault. You deserve more than staged promises and empty headlines. If you ever decide to start again, I will be there, not as a deal, but as a man who finally understands what he almost lost." Her hands trembled as she read it. For a long while, she just sat there, listening to the rain against the window. Then she folded the letter and placed it inside her sketchbook, between 2 pages of unfinished drawings. Weeks passed. The headlines faded, replaced by new scandals, new stories, but the ache lingered, the kind that no apology could erase. One afternoon, Ava visited a small design studio that was hiring interns. The owner, an older woman, studied her portfolio. You have potential, she said. You just need a fresh start. Ava smiled faintly. I think I am finally ready for that. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the pavement shining under the afternoon Sunday, somewhere miles away, in a quiet office overlooking the skyline. Julian looked out the window and whispered to himself. She was never pretending. And for the first time, both of them stepped into a future that was no longer written in contracts, but in choice. A month later, New York felt quieter. The scandal had burned itself out, leaving behind only faint traces, old headlines buried under new ones. For Ava, life had returned to something simple, almost peaceful. She worked part-time at the design studio, helping sketch layouts and arrange client meetings. It was honest work, small but steady, and for the first time in a long while, she slept without the weight of pretending. Still, sometimes she caught herself looking out the window, wondering where Julian was. The news mentioned him only briefly now. Reed Global's stock had stabilized. The board had issued a public apology for the unfounded allegations. But Julian himself had vanished from the spotlight. No interviews, no photographs, no trace of the man who once ruled every headline. One gray afternoon, Ava was closing the studio when a familiar car pulled up outside. The driver stepped out and handed her an envelope. "From Mr. Reed," he said simply. Her pulse quickened. She thanked him and waited until she was inside to open it. Inside was a simple invitation printed on thick ivory paper. The Reed Foundation invites you to the grand opening of the Collins Art and Design Center, in honor of those who see beauty where the world sees struggle. Her breath caught. Below the printed text, a handwritten note read, "Come if you wish, no contracts this time." That Friday evening, she stood outside a newly renovated brick building near the riverfront. The sign above the door glowed softly against the twilight. Collins Art and Design Center. Through the glass, she saw paintings, sketches, and handcrafted pieces displayed under warm lights, many of them her own designs, ones she had forgotten she ever showed him. Julian stood near the entrance, dressed simply in a dark suit. When their eyes met, the noise of the room seemed to fade. "I thought you disappeared," Ava said quietly. "I did," Julian replied. "I needed to learn what mattered without hiding behind a star's company name." She looked around, overwhelmed. "You did all of this?" He nodded. "You once told me you see the world honestly. I wanted others to see it too." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Julian took a slow breath. "I did not invite the press. I did not want headlines. I just wanted you to know that this," he gestured around them, "was never about saving an image. It was about saving what I almost destroyed." Ava's eyes softened. "You cannot fix everything with money, Julian." "I know," he said. "That is why this time I am asking, not offering." She looked down at the invitation in her hand, then back at him. For the first time since that rainy night at the airport, she smiled, not the practiced kind for cameras, but something quiet and real. "Then maybe," she said, "we start again, no scripts, no signatures, just us." Julian nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just us." And in that moment, the noise of the past finally fell silent. The night of the gallery opening lingered in Ava's mind long after the guests had gone home. The quiet streets by the river shimmered with reflections of city lights, and for the first time in months, she did not feel small beneath them. Julian had stayed behind, helping the staff clean up even after the last champagne glass had been taken away. When she walked back into the gallery to grab her coat, he was standing in front of one of her sketches, a city skyline drawn in soft charcoal, the same sketch she had shown him weeks ago on a rainy afternoon. He turned when he heard her footsteps. "Do you remember telling me this drawing was unfinished?" he asked. Ava smiled faintly. "It still is." "I never decided what to put in the middle." Julian stepped closer, his expression gentle. "Then maybe that is where we start." They stood there for a long moment, the silence between them no longer awkward but alive with something fragile and new. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. For a second, Ava's heart froze. "Julian," she whispered, "you do not have to." "I know," he said quietly. "But I want to." Inside was a simple silver ring, not extravagant, not meant for headlines. "It is not a contract," he said. "It is a promise. You once told me love should never feel like an obligation. I am asking you to choose it this time, freely." Her hands trembled as he placed the box in her palm. "I do not know if I am ready for something perfect," she said softly. Julian smiled. "Then let us make something honest instead." Ava looked up at him, her eyes glistening. "No cameras, no rules, just us." He nodded. "Just us." Outside, snow had begun to fall, soft and slow, settling on the cobblestones like forgiveness. The city felt quieter than it ever had before. Ava slipped the ring onto her finger and exhaled, a sound halfway between a laugh and a sob. Julian reached for her hand, and together they stepped outside into the cold. The gallery lights glowed behind them, casting their shadows across the street. As they walked toward the car, Ava glanced up at the sky and whispered, "You once told me people rarely walk away from a lifeline. Maybe this time, we both found ours." Julian squeezed her hand gently. "Maybe we did." The snow kept falling, erasing the old footprints behind them. And for the first time since that night at the airport, there was no pretense, no script, only two people who had chosen to stay. A year later, spring returned to New York. The city had traded its gray skies for soft sunlight and streets lined with blooming trees. The Collins Art and Design Center had become a small but beloved landmark by the river, a place where students and young artists came to learn, to dream, and to find a voice. Inside one of the studios, laughter echoed as Ava guided a group of interns through their first exhibition layout. Her sleeves were rolled up, her hair tied loosely, and a faint trace of paint brushed across her cheek. She looked alive in a way she never had before, rooted, present, at peace. At the far end of the room, the glass doors opened. Julian stepped in quietly, holding a box of pastries from the cafe downstairs. His business suit had been replaced by a simple sweater and jeans, a version of him that almost no one else in the world saw. "You are late," Ava teased, glancing over her shoulder. "Traffic," he said, setting the box on the table. "Or maybe I just like watching you work." The interns grinned before slipping out of the room, leaving them alone. Ava wiped her hands and turned toward him. "You should have called. I could have picked you up." He smiled. "No more contracts, remember? I drive myself these days." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "How is Reed Global?" "Still standing," he said. "But I am no longer there full-time." The board finally learned that a company survives even when its founder stops pretending to be invincible. Ava crossed the room and rested her hands on his shoulders. "You finally let go," Julian nodded, his eyes warm. "I had good reason to." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small folded paper. "I found this yesterday while cleaning my desk. It was the old contract, their original agreement, faded and torn. Across the top, her signature still shimmered faintly in black ink." Julian smiled as he handed it to her. "I kept it to remind myself what I never want again." Ava looked at the paper for a moment, then reached for a nearby candle and held the corner over the flame. The edges curled, blackened, then turned to ash. She watched it burn until only a wisp of smoke remained. "No more pretending," she said softly. Julian took her hand. "No more pretending." Outside, the evening light spilled through the windows, painting them both in gold. The city hummed, quietly in the distance, alive and endless. But in that small room, time felt still. As the sun dipped below the skyline, Ava rested her head on his shoulder. "You once said people rarely walk away from a lifeline," she whispered. "I think we just learned how to build one together." Julian smiled, kissing her hair. "To love without contracts. To love without fear," she answered. And with that, the story that began with a mistake and a deal ended where it was always meant, to two hearts no longer bound by paper, but by choice.